The airport was full that morning. People stood in long lines. Children cried. Businessmen checked their watches. The loudspeaker kept calling out gate numbers. But in the middle of all that noise, one woman walked with quiet power. Her name was Tiana Brooks. She wore a simple black coat, carried a leather bag, and had a calm face. Her skin was a rich, deep brown. Her hair was in a clean bun. She looked like any other traveler. No one guessed who she really was. She walked to gate 1 for B, ready to board her flight to New York. It was a business class seat, row 3, window. She didn't care much about windows, but it helped her avoid small talk. She had an important meeting that evening. She needed peace. When the gate opened, people rushed in. Tiana waited. She believed in patience. Finally, it was her turn. She showed her boarding pass and smiled. The flight attendant barely looked at her. Tiana nodded politely. "Good morning," she said. The attendant didn't answer. Tiana walked down the narrow aisle, pulling her bag behind her. When she reached her seat, she found someone else's bag already above it, taking all the space. She looked around and tried to find another spot. Every compartment nearby was full. She pressed the call button. The same flight attendant came over. Her name tag said, Laura, yes. Laura asked sharply. Tiana smiled gently. "Hi, I can't fit my bag in the overhead bin. Would you mind helping me find a spot?" Laura gave her a long, hard look. "You should have boarded earlier. We're full now," she said. Tiana kept her voice calm. "I understand. I was in the group call, but I waited until others went first. I didn't want to block the lane." Laura sighed, annoyed. "Well, there's no space now. You can check your bag." "But it has my medication inside," Tiana said softly. "I'd prefer to keep it close." "Ma'am, we don't have time for this." Tiana nodded slowly. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned to open the nearby bin again to try shifting the bags herself. Then it happened. As she reached up to move the luggage, Laura suddenly pushed her shoulder. "Ma'am, I told you to sit down," Laura snapped. Tiana stumbled slightly, her shoulder hitting the edge of the seat. The passengers nearby gasped. A few stared. Most looked away. No one moved. The entire plane went quiet. You could hear a baby in the back crying. You could hear a man chewing gum. Could hear silence that was too loud. Tina, she didn't yell, she didn't curse, she didn't cry, she just reached into her coat, pocket, and pulled out her phone. Laura rolled her eyes. "Phone should be off now, ma'am." Tiana unlocked the screen and made a call. Her voice was quiet, but the calm in her tone made the nearby crew nervous. "Hey, I need you to do something," she said into the phone. "There was an incident. Gate 14B. Flight 2705. I was physically pushed by the lead attendant. I want it recorded." She paused, then added, "Yes, I want full video pulled from the gate camera and cabin cam. Also connect with HR. This is not just a complaint. I want it handled at the board level." Laura blinked. The color drained from her face. Passengers nearby started whispering. Did she say board level? Who is she calling? She sounds powerful. A man across the aisle took out his phone and searched her name. His jaw dropped. He whispered to the woman next to him, "She's on the board of this airline. She owns part of it." The woman's eyes widened. The baby stopped crying. Everyone stared. Tiana ended the call. Then she looked directly at Laura. Her eyes didn't show anger. They showed history. Years of being ignored. Years of being talked over. Years of being doubted. She said just one line. "Thank you. You've shown exactly what this company needs to fix." Then she calmly sat down. The pilot made an announcement. "We have a delay at the front. Please remain seated." Laura whispered something to another attendant. They both looked shaken. Soon, a uniformed airport supervisor boarded the plane. He walked straight to Tiana. "Ms. Brooks, would you be willing to speak with us outside the cabin?" Tiana stood. She picked up her bag. She walked past Laura. She paused. Then she said softly, "You might want to call your manager or your lawyer." Left the plane. As the doors closed behind her, the cabin filled with tension. No one laughed now. Back inside the terminal, Tiana stood near a large window, looking at the runway. Her phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. Recording pulled. Legal team alerted. Waiting for your instruction, Jay. She smiled faintly. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. But this was the first time she had power, and she was ready to use it. Meanwhile, inside the plane, Laura sat in the galley, pale and sweating. She didn't look like someone important, she whispered. Another flight attendant frowned. You pushed her? She was in the way. She asked for help. Laura stayed quiet. Back at the airline's headquarters, a red flag popped up on a screen. A name had triggered the alert system. Tiana Brooks, board investor alert level. URG end within minutes. Phones began ringing. Emails were sent. The CEO's office was notified. Someone whispered, "This is going to be bad." And somewhere far away, in a small town, an old woman sat watching TV. A news banner scrolled across the screen, breaking. Passenger reportedly pushed on flight. Only 775 source says she's airline board member. The old woman smiled. It was Tiana's mother, and she whispered to herself, they don't know who they messed with. Tiana sat alone in the VIP lounge. The room was quiet. Gentle hum from the air conditioner was the only sound. She sipped a glass of water, calm on the outside. But inside, her mind was already working. Her assistant had messaged her. Legal team online. Cameras from Gate 14B and aircraft cabin are secured. Another message followed. The airline's emergency board line has been alerted. They know it's you. Tiana closed her eyes for a moment. She had faced worse in her life. People who ignored her. Meetings where men talked over her. Moments where being a black woman meant being doubted before she even spoke. But this time, she wasn't just a passenger. She was part owner of this airline. Far away, in a tall glass building in New York, James Holder, the airline's chief operating officer, was in the middle of a finance meeting. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, alert. Incident involving board investor, flight 2705, passenger name, Tiana Brooks. Keywords triggered, physical contact. Crew misconduct, legal threat. His face changed. He stood up without a word and left the meeting. 5 minutes later, James stood outside the CEO's office. Is she in? He asked the assistant. The woman nodded. Yes, but she's in a call. James didn't wait. He walked in. The CEO, Rebecca Marsh, was on a video call with someone from the legal department. Her face looked serious. Did you know she was on the plane? James asked as he sat down. Rebecca ended the call. I do now. She said. They both looked at the report again. Tiana Brooks, investor, public speaker, former tech executive, a silent board member. She had never once used her power, never asked for special treatment, never made noise until now. What happened on that plane was assault, James said. She didn't even yell, Rebecca said softly. She just made a phone call. And the crew still doesn't know who she is. Rebecca picked up the phone. Get me airport security at Gate 14B and get Laura Anderson's file. I want to know everything. Inside the airport. The news was spreading. Some passengers were still on the plane, talking in whispers. Others had already posted about it online. A few videos were being shared. Not full proof, but enough to raise eyebrows. One tweet read, Flight attendant pushed a black woman in biz class. Lady stayed calm, made one call. Now the whole airline is freaking out. Who is she? Back in the lounge, a young man named Ryan, part of the airline's senior security, walked in. Miss Brooks, he said gently. Tina looked up. I've been asked to escort you to the private terminal. The airline's leadership would like to speak with you off record if you prefer. Tiana stood slowly. I don't need a private terminal. Need accountability. Ryan swallowed nervously. Yes, ma'am. We understand. The crew and CEO are ready to speak. We're all listening now. At the private terminal, Tiana was led into a quiet office with glass walls. Inside, James and Rebecca were already waiting. They both stood when she entered. Tiana. Ah, Rebecca said. We are. Tiana raised her hand. No apologies, she said. Not yet. Once had her phone on the table and tapped once. A small red light blinked. I'm recording this conversation For my own records. I trust you won't mind. Becca and James nodded. Tina sat down slowly. I want to tell you what happened today. Not because I want compensation. Not because I want attention. But because this isn't the first time. James leaned forward. You have our full attention. Tiana looked directly at them. This airline, she said, has a culture problem. Today I was treated like a threat. Not because of what I did, but because of what I look like. That attendant didn't see a businesswoman. She didn't see an investor. She saw a black woman standing, and her first reaction was to push. Rebecca looked down. I'm tired, Tiana continued. Tired of silence. Tired of watching people like her hold power, while people like me are told to stay calm. This time, I won't stay quiet. James spoke carefully. What do you want us to do? Tiana didn't blink. I want her removed immediately. I want public acknowledgement, not some small memo, but a real apology from leadership. Airline to review all complaints of discrimination in the last 5 years. And I want those reports made public. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. That's a lot. Tiana leaned in. No, that's the bare minimum. Outside that glass room, workers paused in the hallway. They could see the meeting through the clear walls. They couldn't hear anything. But they saw who was sitting at the table. They saw the power in Tiana's calm, and they began to wonder if maybe the whole company was about to change. Meanwhile, in the break room for airline crew, Laura sat with her head in her hands. She scrolled her phone. The story was already online. Airline attendant pushes woman. Turns out she's aboard. Remember, the comments were brutal. She should be fired. Imagine pushing your own boss. She stayed calm. That's power. Laura began to cry, but still, she didn't say sorry. In another city, a small podcast picked up the story. A young host spoke into her mic. You know what I love? She said. This black woman didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't throw a fit. She made one call, and the whole system started shaking. That's what real power looks like. Her co-host nodded. And the best part? Nobody saw it coming. Tiana stepped out of the meeting. Reporters? We're already gathering outside the terminal. One shouted, Ms. Brooks. Can you tell us what happened? She paused, then said just one line, watch what happens next. And she walked away. The airline's headquarters building looked normal from outside glass walls. Tall pillars, flags waving in the wind. But inside, things were falling apart. Phones rang every 5 minutes. Emails with subject lines like, urgent board member incident and crisis control needed. Popped up one after another. The company's public relations director, a short man named Stephen Grant, rushed into a conference room. His hair was messy, his shirt untucked. We have a serious situation, he said. Rebecca Marsh, the CEO, sat at the table. She looked calm. Her hands were shaking under the table. Stephen connected his laptop to the screen and pulled up a search result. This is what the public sees when they type her name now. He pointed to the top of the screen. Leona Brooks. Silent power behind the nation's top airlines investor, author, tech founder, board member, advocate for diversity. Then he clicked on a video. Tiana was speaking on a TED Talk stage. Calm/strong, wearing the same expression she had on the plane. I don't raise my voice, I raise my presence. And when people ask what, I do. I tell them this. I walk into systems that don't want me, and I sit at the table anyway. Stephen paused the video. She's not just another board member, he said. She's the board member, Harvard degree, tech company sold. $4 million. Voted one of the top 50 most influential black women in America, and she owns nearly 3% of this airline's shares. The room went silent. In the HR department, Lena Thomas, the director of internal review, opened the flight crew files. She searched. Laura Anderson, the profile popped up. Years of experience. Clean file on the surface, but Lena knew where to dig deeper. She clicked Archived Reports. A list opened. Complaint 1. Rude tone with elderly passenger. Complaint 2. Dismissive behavior towards Spanish-speaking passenger. Complaint 3. Passenger said she was grabbed roughly when trying to reach overhead bin. Lena frowned. These were never fully investigated. She whispered, She highlighted all the reports and flagged them. Reopen immediately. Back at the terminal, Tiana waited in a quiet corner. She didn't post anything online. She didn't give interviews. But she watched the news carefully. Her phone buzzed. It was her lawyer, Jordan Ellis. He spoke quickly. "We pulled all the documents you asked for. Laura's history is worse than expected. At least 6 complaints in the last 2 years. All dismissed without real action." Tiana's eyes narrowed. "Then it's not just about her. It's about the people who protected her," Jordan continued. "Also the internal team." "Just discovered something else? The head of cabin training? Laura's cousin?" Tiana sighed. "Of course she is." At a busy cafe across town, a young journalist named Maya, working for a small but fast-rising news site, he got a tip from an anonymous employee inside the airline. It was a screenshot of the flight. Crew record. Maya looked at it and blinked. "She's been reported before?" she said. Her editor looked over her shoulder. "Post it, but it's not confirmed yet. It will be." "Post it. The story's already blowing up." Within minutes, a headline hit Twitter. "Exclusive. Flight attendant had 6 past complaints before pushing Tiana Brooks. People started sharing it like fire." On the plane where it all began, the crew had finally landed in New York. Passengers left quietly. Some gave Laura cold stares. Others ignored her completely. One woman passed by and said, "You should be ashamed." Laura sat in the back, alone. Her hands trembled. She checked her phone. Hundreds of missed messages. Social media exploding. News articles showing her face. Blurred out for now, but it wouldn't stay hidden for long. Meanwhile, inside a sleek office in New York City, Mr. Darnell Hughes, the airline's chairman, walked into a boardroom. He was a tall black man in his 60s. Calm voice, sharp mind. "Tiana." On the phone, his assistant said. He picked it up. "Tiana," he said, "what happened?" She told him everything, step by step, without anger. With quiet fire. When she finished, there was silence on the line. Then Darnell said, "You know what this means, don't you?" Tiana nodded. "It means we're not just dealing with one woman's mistake. We're dealing with a system." Back at headquarters, Stephen walked into the CEO's office again. He looked pale. "There's more," he said. "A video from the gate camera leaked." Rebecca stood up. "Leaked?" "Yes, someone posted it anonymously." He pressed play. It showed Laura pushing Tiana on the plane. The push was clear, aggressive, not a light touch. Stephen whispered, "It's everywhere now. It's over 2 million views in 1 hour." Rebecca sat down. "We're not controlling the story anymore," she said. Stephen nodded. "No, she is." In a quiet hotel room later that night, Tiana looked at her reflection in the mirror. She had been pushed. Yes, but she hadn't fallen. She had risen. And now, everyone was watching what she would do next. It started with a single post. A blurry photo. Just a freeze frame from the airport gate camera. But it was enough. It showed Tiana Brooks standing calmly in the aisle, and next to her, Laura, the flight attendant, pushing her back with one hand. There were no words in the photo, just the image. A black woman standing still. A white woman shoving her. The caption under the photo said, "This is how they treated a board member of the airline. Now guess how they treat regular black women." Within minutes, the photo went viral. Back at Tiana's hotel room, her phone kept vibrating. Hundreds of notifications, journalists, activists, former employees, even celebrities. Some messages said, "Thank you for standing strong." "With you? They didn't know who you were, but we do," her assistant called. "Ma'am, the story's trending. Hashtag she was pushed is now the #1 hashtag on Twitter." Tiana stayed silent for a moment. Then she said, "We didn't start this. Fire. But we're not going to put it out either." In the airline HQ media room, the PR team panicked. Stephen, the PR director, stood in front of 4 big monitors. Each one showed news headlines. Black CEO pushed on plane airline in crisis. Shocking footage leaks. Tiana Brooks assaulted mid-flight. Flight crew ignored her now. Their jobs may be gone. Another screen showed live social media. People were angry. But not just angry, energized. Former airline workers began posting old stories, Passengers started sharing personal videos. One tweet read, "I flew with this airline last year. They ignored my grandma in a wheelchair. We told them. They did nothing. Glad someone important is finally holding them to the fire." Stephen turned to the CEO. "We've lost control." Rebecca frowned. "Who leaked the video?" Stephen hesitated. "We don't know." She stared at him. "You better find out." At a small apartment in Atlanta, Maria, a young part-time airport worker, sat on her bed. She was the one who had posted the photo. She didn't know. She had just been working near Gate 1 for B that morning. Saw the push. Saw Tiana stay calm. Saw. Laura rolled her eyes. It reminded her of something her own mother once told her. There are people who believe silence is weakness, but sometimes silence is a sword. So, Maria posted the photo. She didn't think it would go anywhere. Now her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her best friend called. "Girl, you started a movement," Maria whispered. "I think." "I did." Inside Laura's apartment, Laura sat on her couch, TV on. Face blank. The news was everywhere. Her name wasn't said out loud yet, but she knew it was coming. Her phone rang. It was her cousin, the head of cabin crew training. "Laura," he said, voice low. "Why didn't you tell me it was her?" "I didn't know," Laura shouted. She looked normal. Her cousin sighed. "Now the board is demanding files. HR reopened your complaints. They're digging everything up." Laura's hands shook. "But I didn't mean to hurt her," she whispered. "But you did," he said. "And you weren't the first." At a morning news show, a host looked into the camera. "This story is not just about race. It's about power. About how quiet people can shake the walls of big companies. And the woman who made one phone call? She's not done yet." They played a clip of Tiana's past speech. They want you to react with anger. They expect you to scream. But when you respond with control, you scare them more. Later that day, Tiana stood in front of her hotel window. Down below, protesters gathered. Some held signs. "I am not just a passenger. We fly to respect black women." Others simply held up her photo. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Are you ready?" she asked. Tana turned around. "Yes," she said. "Let's give them something to listen to."
Ad.
That evening, Tiana's first Statham and Tiana walked into a small press room. Cameras flashed. The room fell quiet. She stood at the podium and said, "I didn't ask to become a story. I just wanted to fly to New York. But something happened that too many women, especially black women, experience every day. I was pushed, disrespected, dismissed, and when I responded with calm, I was ignored again until they realized who I was.
I want to be clear.
This is not about revenge.
Oh, man.
This is about change. Not just for me, but for the thousands of people who don't have a camera or a title or a seat on the board." She stepped back. The crowd clapped. Some stood. Reporters tried shouting questions. She walked out without saying more. Her silence was her power. That night, the news cycle didn't slow down. The hashtag trended in 5 countries. People began calling the airline. Stocks dropped by 6%. Investors started asking questions. Board members scheduled an emergency meeting, and Laura, she finally turned off her phone. The weight of her actions had come full circle. But for Tiana, this was only the beginning. The morning after her statement, Tiana Brooks sat alone on a hotel balcony. The city below her moved fast traffic. Sirens, news vans, protesters gathering outside the terminal. But she wasn't watching the city. She was watching the sky. A plane passed above her. White trail in the blue. Her fingers gripped her coffee cup, and her mind traveled back 20 years ago. Jackson, Mississippi Shea, was just a teenager back then. 16 years old, it was the first time she ever stepped foot on an airplane. She remembered holding her mother's hand tightly. The airport was loud, confusing. It was a big deal. Her mom had saved for 6 months just to afford the tickets. Her mom wore a bright red scarf, her church dress, big earrings. She smiled nervously as they approached the gate. Tiana remembered the moment clearly. Her mother had asked the gate agent. "A white woman? Excuse me? We're trying to find our seats." The woman cut her off. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. This is a boarding area." Tiana blinked. Her mother hadn't been loud. She was just trying to ask a question. The woman rolled her eyes. "Wait, over there," she said sharply. "We'll call your group." Other people got in without question. Families with children, businessmen, a young couple laughing loudly, but her mother treated like a problem, like she didn't belong. On the plane, it got worse. A flight attendant told her mother to move her bag, even though there was space. Later, when her mom asked for a blanket, she was ignored. Tina sat in silence, watching every moment. Her mother said nothing. She just held Tiana's hand and whispered, "Let it go, baby. We got somewhere to be." But Tiana never let it go. That flight stuck in her mind forever. Not because it was the first time she flew, but because it was the first time she saw how power works in silence, how some people are treated with kindness and others with suspicion. Back to the present, Tiana closed her eyes. Her mother had passed away 5 years ago. But her voice was still in Tiana's ears. "Let it go, baby." But now, Tiana couldn't let it go anymore. This wasn't just about her. It was about her mother, her grandmother. Every woman who had been pushed, dismissed, or ignored. Across town, news interviewee, morning news host was interviewing Professor Nee. Elaine Roberts, a black historian. She said, "When people ask why Tiana stayed so calm, I tell them, we've had to be calm for centuries. We teach our daughters to survive in silence." But Tiana's silence was different. It wasn't fear, with strength. And when she finally spoke, the world had to listen. Later that day, a letter from the past. Tiana opened her briefcase and pulled out a small envelope. It was handwritten. She had kept it all these years. It was a letter from her mother, given to her the day Tiana graduated college. It said, "You'll walk into rooms they never meant for you to be in. They'll try to shrink you. Don't fight with noise. Let your success speak. Let your peace shake them. And if you ever get pushed, don't. Fall, rise, and make them remember your name." Tiana held the letter to her chest. Tears filled her eyes. Then she stood up, picked up her coat, and walked toward the door. The past had shaped her, but the future, that belonged to her, inside the airline boardroom that same day. The board members gathered for an emergency meeting. Some were nervous, others were angry. A few wanted to avoid the topic altogether, but one chair sat empty, the one with Tiana's name. They all looked at it. One man asked, "Is she coming?" Another replied, "I don't know. But if she does, we better be ready." Outside the building, the protesters were louder now. They chanted. She was pushed. Power with peace. Fix the system. Reporters stood by with cameras. Passers-by stopped to watch. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a moment. A reckoning. That evening, Private Calciana received a call from an old friend in Washington. He was now a senator. He said, "Tiana, you've started something big. Bigger than a press conference. Bigger than one airline?" She smiled softly. "I didn't start anything. I just answered a push with purpose." That night, as the city lights flickered outside her hotel window, Tiana sat again in silence. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by her memories. Her mother's voice, the weight of all the women who came before her, and the strength of every woman who was watching her. Now, it was just past 9 a.m. when the email arrived in the airline's legal department. Inbox. Subject: Formal legal action, immediate review required from Ellis. Jordan and Associates, the staff lawyer, opened it and froze. Attached was a lawsuit. Notice filed by Tiana Brooks. But this wasn't just a case of personal injury or crew misconduct. It was bigger. The headline on the top page read, "Request for public accountability and full cultural audit of airline practices filed on behalf of Ms. Tiana Brooks, shareholder, board member, and private citizen inside the airline's legal wing." The legal team rushed to the executive floor. Jordan, the company's general counsel, slammed the document on the table. Do you know what she's asking for? He said. Rebecca Marsh, the CEO, took the pages and scanned them. Her face dropped. She doesn't want money, Jordan said. She wants change, added Stephen from PR. Jordan pointed at the next clause, a request for removal of flight crew. Involved review of all past discrimination complaints and independent oversight committee. Rebecca sat back in her chair. This is a bomb, she whispered. Meanwhile, at Jordan Ellis's law firm, Jordan stood by a large glass window, looking down at the protesters outside the airline's headquarters. He turned to Tiana. You sure? About this? He asked. Tiana nodded slowly. I'm not suing for a check. I'm suing to force them to look at themselves. He smiled. Good. Because with this kind of pressure, they won't be able to look away. Online reaction within hours? The media caught the news. Breaking: Tiana Brooks files legal action against Airline, calls for deep investigation into workplace. Culture social media exploded again. People started sharing their own airline stories. I told them a flight attendant insulted me because of my accent. They said it was a misunderstanding. I applied for a job there twice. Never heard back. But my white friend got hired immediately. In the crew lounge, Laura sat alone, her face pale, eyes tired. Another flight attendant walked in, glanced at her, then looked away. Nobody wanted to be near her. Her phone buzzed. A message from HR. You are being placed on unpaid leave during the investigation. She stared at the screen. For a second, her hand shook. Then she tossed the phone aside and whispered, this wasn't supposed to happen. But deep down she knew the truth. She had done this before. She just never got caught. Inside the airline boardroom, board members met again. This time, with more urgency. One of them, an older man with silver hair, slammed the table. This lawsuit could destroy our brand. Another board member leaned forward. We don't just have a public image problem, we have a leadership problem. Quiet woman at the end of the table finally spoke. She's not doing this for herself, she said. She's doing this for all of us, and she's right. We do have a problem. All eyes turned to Tiana's empty seat again. Across the country, a TV panel discussion, one guest, civil rights lawyer, said, Tiana's not just using the law, she's using truth. She's reminding this country that sometimes the strongest move you can make is calm resistance followed by loud action. Later that day, newsroom breaking story leaked. Email from the airline's HR department surfaced online. It showed internal staff complaining about racism and bias as far back as 7 years ago. None of those complaints were ever made. It's public. The airline's problems weren't new. They were just buried. And now, they were being dug up fast. Back at Tiana's hotel, her assistant entered the room. You've gotten calls from 4 airlines, she said. They're offering board seats, partnership deals, even speaking tours. Tiana shook her head. I'm not doing this for attention. Then what are you doing it for? The assistant asked gently. Tiana walked to the window. Justice, she said. For people who never got it? That evening, Tiana's public statement in front of dozens of microphones. She stood again, .com. Dignified, powerful. She spoke clearly. This is not just about me. This is about the people who spoke up and were silenced. About the passengers, who were told their pain was misunderstood. About workers who reported racism and were ignored. I don't want your silence. I don't want your money. I want your change. In the airline's PR room, Stephen looked up from his phone. He had just watched the speech live. Then he looked at the CEO and said, She's winning this, not in court. In the hearts of the people, and back in Tiana's mind, she could hear her mother again. If you ever get pushed, don't fall. Rise and make them remember your name. Laura Anderson had never seen her name trend before. She used to be just another face in the sky, another smiling uniform, another voice saying, Welcome aboard. But now, she was the face of a storm. Her photo hadn't been released yet, but the internet was already circling. People were calling her the flight attendant who pushed a CEO. Some even called her worse names. She didn't sleep much, didn't eat. She just sat in her apartment, TV off, phone in her hand, guilt in her chest. 3 days after the incident, Laura walked into her old childhood room. She had taken the first flight home, away from the city, away from cameras, away from judgment. Her mother, Gloria, watched her walk in with red eyes. "Is it true?" her mother asked softly. Laura sat down on the bed. "I didn't mean to push her like that." "You did?" Gloria asked, folding her arms. Laura nodded slowly. "I thought she was being difficult. I was under pressure. The cabin was full. I didn't know who she was." Gloria sat down beside her. "But does it matter who she was?" Laura looked away. That silence said everything. Back in the past 6 years, Laura was new then. Fresh. Out of training, young. Nervous. Always trying to follow the rules. On one flight, a black woman in business class had asked her kindly, "Can I get some water before takeoff?" "I have a dry throat," Laura, unsure if it was allowed yet, had snapped. "No, not right now." She thought she was doing the right thing. But the woman looked hurt. Later that night, her crew manager told her, "You need to watch your tone with passengers of color. We've had complaints." Laura had rolled her eyes. "People are too sensitive." She had replied. That comment was her first warning, but not the last. Back to the present now. Those old moments haunted her. The memories she had buried were rising again. Faces, voices, remarks, and something worse. She realized she hadn't just made one mistake. She had made many, one by one. Quiet ones, small ones, but they had added up. She had never pushed someone physically before, but emotionally. She had pushed people away for years. The HR report review inside the airline's corporate building. HR was digging through Laura's old files again. There were more complaints than expected. Flight attendant spoke rudely when I asked for a seatbelt extender. She seemed uncomfortable when I sat. In business class, made me feel like I didn't belong. Sighed loudly when I asked for help lifting my bag. They weren't violent acts, but they weren't kind either. They were patterns. Patterns of quiet cruelty. Laura's. Flashback her first training week, she remembered sitting in a room full of new hires. Her supervisor had said, "You'll face all kinds of people. Stay polite, but stay firm, especially with the ones who try to push rules." Then, in a hushed voice, he added, "You'll learn quickly." Some passengers feel entitled just because they shout the word discrimination. Some of the others had laughed. She had laughed too, but now, years later, that joke wasn't funny anymore. One more truth she hadn't told anyone. Her cousin, the one who trained her, who helped her get promoted quickly, had always protected her. He told HR which complaints to ignore. He lost 2 of them. He marked another as resolved without ever calling the passenger. Laura never asked. Him too, but she also never stopped him. Back in her childhood room, Gloria. Her mother sat on the bed beside her. "You weren't raised to push people," she said. Laura whispered, "I didn't mean to." Gloria shook her head, "But you did." Then she added, "And now you have to decide. Will you keep hiding, or will you own it?" Laura looked down. Tears rolled down her cheeks. That night, a private email. Laura opened her laptop. She stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she began to type too. Board of Directors, Airline Legal Team, and Tiana Brooks' subject, my apology and full confession. This letter isn't to save my job. I know I've lost your trust. I'm writing because I finally see what I couldn't before. What I did on that plane wasn't just a mistake. It was the result of years of small, careless moments, of ignoring people's dignity, of choosing speed over respect. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask that you do what's right, not just to me, but for the system that allowed this. I will cooperate fully. I will tell the truth." She hit send, then closed the laptop, and cried for the first time, not because of fear, but because of shame. The sky over the city was gray. Clouds gathered above the airline's glass tower. But inside, something bigger than a storm was brewing. At exactly 10 a.m., Tiana Brooks walked through the sliding doors of the airline's headquarters. No. Security stopped her. No receptionist dared to delay her. Everyone knew her now, and they knew what she had come to do. Inside the boardroom, 12 chairs, 12 leaders, all already seated. The room was quiet. The tension was loud. No one spoke as Tiana entered. She didn't smile. She didn't pause. She walked straight to her seat at the table, the one that had always been hers, but had rarely been noticed. Today, she wasn't invisible. She was the center of the room. The CEO, Rebecca Marsh, cleared her throat. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Brooks," she said. Tina raised her eyes to meet hers. "I'm not here as a guest," she said softly. "I'm a board member. This is my table, too." A few people shifted uncomfortably. The oldest board member, Mr. Carrington, leaned forward. "This has gone too far," he said. "We've lost millions in stock value. There are protests outside our doors. We've made this very public." Tiana didn't flinch. "What I made public," she said, "was the truth. And if the truth shakes your company, maybe the problem isn't what you built." A silence spread through the room like smoke. Tiana Stanshay rose from her chair and walked to the center. "I've sat here in silence for 2 years," she said. "I've listened. I've watched this company ignore complaints, protect people who shouldn't be protected, call it policy." She turned to the projection screen and clicked a button on the remote. Photos and documents appeared. Complaint. Reports marked dismissed without reason. Email showing HR ignoring passengers' concerns. Diversity reports buried in folders labeled low priority. "Do you want to know what happens when you push the wrong person?" she asked. "You get exposed, all of you," Rebecca speaks. "I don't deny mistakes were made," the CEO said carefully. "We're willing to revise procedures." Tiana raised her hand. "No," she said. "You don't get to revise. Get to repair, and I have demands." She placed a printed list on the table. It read, Tiana's non-negotiables. Immediate termination of the flight attendant involved. Full public apology from leadership, aired nationally. Independent third-party review of all crew complaints. In the past 7 years, a permanent diversity oversight board not run by internal HR. Mandatory racial bias training for all employees. Starting with top leadership, gasps filled the room. "That's outrageous," Mr. Carrington said. "We'll look weak." Tiana turned slowly. "No," she said. "You'll look right, for the first time in years." A shift in the room. Another board member, a quiet woman named May Lin, finally spoke. "I support all 5 points," she said. Then another member raised his hand. "Me too." One by one, hands lifted. Even the CEO slowly nodded. Only Mr. Carrington kept his arms crossed. Tiana looked him in the eye. "This company has 2 choices," she said, "grow or rot." Later, a decision is made. The board voted. The demands passed unanimously. Except one. Mr. Carrington stood up and walked out without a word. Tiana watched him go, then whispered, "The door was always open. He just never liked who walked through it." Outside the building, news reporters waited. Tiana stepped outside into the noise cameras flashing, mics stretched toward her. One reporter shouted, "Did they agree to your terms?" Tiana didn't give a speech. She just nodded and said, "Today they listened. Tomorrow they change." Somewhere in her heart, her mother's words echoed again. "Don't fall, baby. Rise." It happened on a Tuesday morning. The airline released a statement to the press. It was printed in bold across newspapers and flashed across every screen in the terminal. "We were wrong, on behalf of our leadership. We offer a full and sincere apology to Miss Tiana Brooks, to our passengers, and to every person who has felt unseen or disrespected within our system. We are taking immediate action. We hear you, see you. It will change." Signed by Rebecca Marsh. CEO Board of Directors. The public reacts. Some clapped, others cried, and some, especially those who had suffered quietly for years, finally felt seen. News anchors praised the statement. Celebrities posted the hashtag they heard her. People wrote messages like, "This is what leadership looks like." She shook the system without shouting. Her silence turned into a roar. But not everyone was happy. Not inside the company, and not outside either. Inside the airline, whispers begin in crew break rooms. Not everyone agreed with the apology. Some staff grumbled behind closed doors. Now we all have to sit through. Bias training because of one moment. She overreacted. Wasn't that serious? What happened to loyalty to your team? Others, especially those who had stayed silent during their own mistreatment, felt the air shift. They started to talk in hushed voices. Some even pulled out their old complaints and whispered, "Maybe now it's time." At the same time, a door opens that afternoon as Tiana sat in her hotel room reviewing legal letters. Her assistant walked in holding a card. "Someone just dropped this off," she said. Tiana took the envelope, opened it slowly. Inside was a note. It read, "You may not remember me, but I remember everything. I was there. I saw what they did to your mother on that flight, and I didn't speak up then. I want to speak now." A former employee. As Tiana stared at the note, her breath caught. For a moment, it was like she was 16 again. Flashback that same flight years ago, she remembered. The man standing near the exit door, older, white, kind eyes. A flight supervisor. Maybe he had seen what happened. He had looked down. He had stayed silent, back to present now. Was reaching out. A witness. After all these years, Tiana picked up her phone and called her lawyer. "I need a meeting," she said. "With who?" Jordan asked. She looked down at the note again, "With the man who saw my mother get ignored and said nothing. If he's ready to speak, so am I." Elsewhere, a former board member plots in, a quiet office across the city. Mr. Carrington. The only board member who walked out during the vote sat in front of his computer. He wasn't done. He didn't believe. In apologies, he didn't like change, and he didn't like being told what to do by people who used to be quiet. He picked up the phone and called an old friend, a journalist from a news outlet that didn't favor change. "I've got a story." "For you," he said, voice cold. About how this entire thing was planned. At Tiana's hotel, a letter from a stranger, another envelope, was slipped under her door that night. It had no name, only 3 words written on the outside. "Don't trust everyone." Tiana stared at it for a long time. Was it a warning, a threat, or something else? She didn't open it yet, not tonight. Outside, the crowd grows despite the apology. People still stood outside airline buildings. Not with anger, now, but with hope. They held candles. Photos of their loved ones, who were once ignored or mistreated. Signs that read, "This was never just one push. We all have stories. Thank you, Tiana." Tiana looks ahead alone on the hotel balcony. Tiana finally closed her laptop. For a moment, she felt tired, but not broken. She whispered, "They broke their silence. But now I need to break mine." She reached for her phone and opened her notes at the top. She wrote, book title, "The Quiet Seat, How One Flight Changed Everything." His name was Edward Lane. He had once worked for the airline for over 30 years, first as a flight attendant, then a supervisor, then quietly. He retired. No farewell party. Oh, goodbyes. Just left. But he never forgot one moment. One woman, one child holding her hand. That flight so many years ago, he still remembered the seat numbered 18B. He remembered the woman's warm smile when she asked a simple question. "Excuse me, could you help us find our row?" He remembered how the gate agent snapped at her, how her smile faded, how the child beside her, the young girl with bright eyes, watched every second. He knew what it meant. He knew it wasn't fair. And still, he stayed silent now in a small. Cafeciana walked in wearing a simple gray coat. No cameras, no assistant, just her. Edward stood up slowly from his corner table. His white hair was neatly combed. His hands shook slightly. "Ms. Brooks," said quietly. Tiana nodded and sat across from him. "You were there," she said. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he replied. "Edward's confession, I've seen a lot in the air," he began. "People yelling, pushing, pretending, but your mother? She didn't do anything wrong." Tiana said nothing. She just listened. "I watched her get treated like she didn't belong." "And I watched you watching her," he said. I remember thinking someone should say something, but I didn't. He lowered his eyes, and I've lived with that moment ever since. Tiana leaned forward, voice calm. Why now? Edward looked up because silence is no longer safe. Because I saw what they did to you and how you stayed calm, and how you made the world listen. Tiana's eyes watered. She hadn't expected to cry, but the words coming from someone who had stayed silent for decades meant something. She said quietly, you could have changed that moment for her. But now, you can help change what happens next. Edward nodded. I'll testify. I'll write a statement. Whatever you need. Meanwhile, the leak back at the airline, something dark was brewing. Mr. Carrington's story had been published. The headline read, Inside Job? Was the airline sabotaged by one of its own? The article claimed that Tiana had used her influence to set up the incident so she could take over the company. There was no proof, no truth. It's just rumors and bitterness. But the article spread like wildfire. Backlash begins DNS. Inbox flooded. Some people believed her, others didn't. Messages poured in. You're brave, you're a liar. Don't stop speaking. Even her assistant looked worried. They're trying to twist the story, she said. Tina stayed quiet for a long moment, then said, Good. That means the story's working. The letter revisited that night. She opened the envelope that had been slipped under her door days ago. It said, Don't trust everyone. She turned the note over in tiny handwriting. Someone had added, Carrington is talking to press. He wants revenge. Be careful. Tiana stared at it and smiled, not because she felt safe, but because now she knew what to do next. Edward's public statement the next morning. A video surfaced. Edward Lane sat in a chair, speaking directly to camera. My name is Edward Lane. I worked for the airline for 31 years. I saw Ms. Brooks' mother mistreated. I didn't speak then, but I am speaking now. This company has a history of ignoring black women. I stayed silent too long. Tiana didn't make this happen. We did, and she's just finally making us look at it. The video went viral within hours. A new hashtag emerges. People began posting with hashtag he finally spoke. Hashtag witness to change. Hashtag we see you now TIANA. Sat in front of the mirror. She wasn't fixing her makeup. She was watching herself, breathing slow, steady. Her phone buzzed again. Another headline. Was it all a setup? Whistleblower claims Tiana orchestrated airline scandal to gain power. The article was everywhere now. TV shows debated her. Pundits argued she was being called a fraud, a manipulator, a genius in disguise. But none of them were saying the one thing that mattered, the truth, in a TV studio downtown Chiana. Sat across from the host of a national morning show. This wasn't her first interview, but it was. Her most important one yet. The host didn't waste time. Ms. Brooks, he said, there are people saying this entire thing, your push, your silence, your lawsuit, was planned. Tiana paused. Then she leaned forward. Eyes clear, I say. If you think I planned to be pushed in front of a plane full of strangers, if you think I wanted to be humiliated, doubted, and torn apart by the public, then maybe you're not asking the right question. The question isn't, was it planned? It's why was I the one who had to fix a broken system? With silence. Behind the cameras, the real plan. While the interview aired live, her team was already working. Her assistant uploaded a document to the press cloud. Proof. Emails showing Carrington had contacted the reporter before the story broke. Voice recordings of him saying, she's dangerous. She's changing too much, too fast. A deleted draft of the article written before any investigation had started. Minutes later, social media turns. Suddenly, the hashtag changed again. Hashtag Carrington lied. Hashtag truth wins. Hashtag she stayed calm. People now saw the trap and how she walked through it without shouting, without breaking. Inside Carrington's office, he threw his phone against the wall, his face red. Hand shaking, his assistant whispered, You should have known she'd keep receipts. Carrington muttered. She was supposed to stay quiet. Like her mother. And he said the words that sealed his fate. This is why people like her don't belong at the top. What he didn't know was, The mic on his desk was still recording, and that recording was sent directly to the board. Meanwhile, Tiana's lawyer responds, Jordan held a press conference outside the courthouse. He said, "Let's be clear. My client didn't file a lawsuit to become famous. She filed it to stop a company from pretending. And now, we know who was pretending all along." The airline reacts fast that evening. The board met privately. They voted to remove Carrington from all positions permanently. Then, they released a final statement. Tiana Brooks is not the problem. She revealed the problem. And we are grateful. She did. Later that night, a call from Edward Lane, the retired witness, called Tiana. "I just watched the news," he said. "You didn't shout. You didn't fight dirty. You just told the truth." Tiana smiled. "I learned from the best," she replied. "Your mother?" Edward asked. "No," Tiana said. "All the women who were told to sit down, and still stood anyway." Across the city, a young girl watches in a small apartment. A 12-year-old black girl sat cross-legged. Watching Tiana's interview on YouTube, her mother stood behind her, arms folded. The girl whispered, "She looks like me," her mother said. "She speaks for you too." Outside, candles, not signs. The crowd outside the airline headquarters was different now. No yelling, no banners, just candles, and pictures, faces of people were pushed, dismissed, silenced. Datna walked past them quietly, one hand over her heart. The sun was just starting to rise. Soft golden light spilled into Tiana's room. But she hadn't slept. Not because of fear, not because of stress, but because of the envelope in her hands. It had been sitting at the bottom of a memory box for years. Her mother's handwriting, she had found it by accident the night before, tucked between old college essays and birthday cards. On the front it said, "For Tiana, when you feel like the world can finally hear you." She sat on the edge of the bed. Tiana ran her fingers over the paper. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but something in her chest whispered, "It's time." She opened the letter. "The letter, my sweet girl. If you're reading this, then maybe this world has changed a little, or maybe you changed it. I don't know where you are in life right now, but I know this. I always knew you were meant for more. You saw things early, how people look at you different, how they listen or don't. And baby, I know that silence hurts more than words, but I also know this. Silence can be a seed. One day, it grows into something strong, something that rises from the ground and demands to be seen. If they ever push you, don't push back with hate. Push back with purpose. Speak only when you're ready. And when you speak, say something that lasts. Let the world remember your voice. And never, not for 1 second, believe you are small. You're the storm and the calm. You're my best story. Love." Mom Tiana didn't cry. Not at first. She just held the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. The war had been public. The pain had been personal. But this moment, this was private. A mother speaking across time, and a daughter finally being heard. Flashback, a childhood moment. Tiana sat on the floor with crayons. She was 5. Drawing planes and clouds. Her mother came over, smiling. "What you drawing, baby?" Tiana looked up. "I'm gonna fly one day." Her mother laughed. "Not just on it, baby," she said. "One day you're gonna change the way they fly." Tiana had giggled. She didn't understand, but now she did. Later that morning, a new interview. Tiana was invited to a small college to speak with young black students. She walked into the room with no cameras, no microphones, just rows of chairs filled with girls who looked like her younger self. She didn't read from a script. She held the letter and said, "This is from my mother. She didn't go to college. She didn't make headlines. Gave me the words I needed when the world got loud. Now I'm giving them to you." She read the letter out loud. One girl cried quietly. Another clutched her notebook like it was gold. Back in the airline office, the new training program began that day. Flight crews gathered for their first official racial equity workshop. A quote from Tiana's mother was placed on the screen. "If they ever push, you don't push back with hate, push back with purpose." Some rolled their eyes, but others leaned in. One young white flight attendant whispered to her coworker, "I think we should have been hearing this a long time ago." That night, a message on Tiana's phone was a voice note from someone she didn't expect. "Laura," the flight attendant who pushed her. The voice was shaking. "Honest, I watched your speech. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want to say thank you, not just for showing the world what I did, but for showing me who I was." Tiana didn't respond. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence didn't mean nothing. Sometimes it means peace. Her name was Rosa Delgado. She hadn't spoken to the media. She hadn't posted online. She didn't hold signs or march in the crowds, but she was there in row 12. She saw everything, and for weeks, she said nothing. Until now, the call that changed everything. Shana's assistant answered the phone late at night. "Someone named Rosa wants to speak to Ms. Brooks," she said. "She says she was on the plane." Tiana paused. "There were over 100 passengers," she said softly. "Why her?" The assistant replied. "She said she saw the moment, and the one after it." That got Tiana's attention. The meeting, they met at a small tea house near the university. Rosa was in her early 50s, short hair, a blue scarf wrapped around her shoulders. She looked nervous. "I wasn't going to come," Rosa said. "I thought my voice wouldn't matter, but I realized silence never really protected anyone." Tiana smiled gently. "Go ahead." Rosa looked down for a moment, then began. "Rosa's story, I was in row 12, near the aisle. I saw the push. I saw you reach for your phone. I saw something else." Tiana leaned in. Rosa's eyes filled with emotion. "When the flight attendant pushed you," the man next to me muttered under his breath. "That's what happens when they act up." Tiana's chest tightened. Rosa nodded, and I froze. I didn't say anything, but I felt sick. Then Rosa's hands shook. "That's not all." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small voice recorder. "I was testing my new interview mic that day. Didn't turn it off. It recorded everything." Audio. Shiana and her assistant sat in silence as the audio played. The push, the gasps, the murmurs, and the quiet, hateful whisper. "That's what happens when they act up." Then came something else. Laura, the flight attendant, muttering quietly under her breath. "They always want special treatment." Tiana's hands tightened around her teacup, not because she didn't believe it, but because she already knew. Now, the world would hear it too. The decision. Rosa looked scared. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," she said, "but I think people need to know the full truth. Not just what happened to you, but what people still believe is okay to say." Tiana nodded. "Rosa," she said softly, "you just became more than a witness. You became a voice someone else was waiting for." The press conference 2 days later, a room filled with reporters, cameras rolling, lights flashing. Rosa stood beside Tiana. She held the recorder in one hand and a short written statement in the other. She read, voice trembling but clear. "I was quiet, but not anymore. I saw what happened. I heard what was said. Silence is not neutral. Today, I choose to be loud because the people who suffer don't always get that choice." The impact. The recording went viral. TV anchors replayed the whisper again and again. For many, it wasn't shocking, but it was proof. Proof that the push wasn't just an accident. It was part of a system of hidden words, quiet hate, and shrugged off harm, and now it couldn't be denied. Meanwhile, at airline headquarters, the CEO sat in her office, listening to the audio. She leaned back in her chair and whispered, "We didn't just need change, we needed a mirror." Then she picked up her phone and called HR. "Start a company-wide review," she said. Not just reports. Culture. Back at the tea, Housey, Shiana, and Rosa sat across from each other again. This time, there was no silence, just quiet strength. "You did something brave," Tiana said. "So did you," Rosa replied. "You went first. I just followed." Tiana smiled. "Gently, then let's hope more people follow you too." For weeks, Tiana's face had been everywhere. News, social media, talk shows now. Silence. The hashtag slowed. The reporters. Left the outside crowds thinned. The candles outside the airline building were gone. But Tiana was still here, still standing, still waiting because she knew something most people didn't. Public attention brings noise, but justice needs silence to grow inside the airline. A different kind of meeting, no cameras, no press, just 12 people in a plane, quiet room. Tiana sat at the end of the table. Across from her sat 2 HR directors, 1 senior pilot, 3 flight attendants, and for board members, they weren't here to protect the airline. They were here to change it. The tough conversations begin. One black male flight attendant cleared his throat. "I've worked here 11 years, he said. I've smiled through slurs. I've swallowed insults. Because if I spoke up, I was angry or hard to work with." A Latina gate agent added, "I was told not to speak Spanish in uniform." But others joked in French, and nobody said a word. The room was still. Tiana listened. She didn't interrupt. She let the pain breathe because she knew truth needed space. Someone finally says it, the head of operations. A white man in his 50s spoke next. He looked down at his notepad, then said, "I used to think none of this was real, that people were too sensitive. But now I realize, I just didn't want to see it. Because if I saw it, I'd have to change." Looked at Tiana. "Thank you for making me look." Back in Tiana's apartment, it was the first time in months that the apartment was quiet. No phone calls, no court dates, just a warm blanket and the sound of rain outside. She curled up on the couch. Her assistant had left a simple note on the table. "You don't have to be strong every day. Some days surviving is enough." She smiled and finally slept. Meanwhile, Laura's first day of training across the city. Laura, the flight attendant who had pushed Tiana, sat in a small circle with 8 other crew members. No uniforms, no titles, just humans. A trainer asked them to describe a moment when they felt like they got it wrong. Laura raised her hand. "I didn't just get it wrong," she said. "I carried the wrong thing inside me for years, and it finally came out. And won." Pushed. Nobody clapped. Nobody comforted her. But nobody judged her either. It was a start. A new hire inspired by the news at the airport. A young black woman walked into her first airline training class. Her name was Iman, as she sat in the front row. She spotted a quote on the screen. "If they ever push, you don't push back. With hate, push back with purpose." Tiana's mother, Mani, smiled. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it's different now." Later, a letter in the mail. Tiana received a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was of her mother, smiling, holding a young Tiana at the gate of an airport. On the back, someone had written, "She didn't just give birth to a child. She gave birth to a legacy." Tiana held the photo to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, Mama. I'm still listening." It was buried deep in a hard drive, labeled segment _051 _TB Rooks _UNAIRED.MOV. A junior producer at a national news station found it while archiving files. He opened the video and just sat there, watching, then shaking his head, then whispering to himself, "Why didn't we release this?" The interview room weeks ago had been recorded a few days after the airline's public apology. A small, private room, 1 camera, 1 mic, no script. The interviewer had asked only one question. What would you say to your younger self on the day you were pushed? Tiana had paused, looked away, then said, "I wouldn't say anything. I'd just hold her hand, because she already knew what the world was." She didn't need words. She needed someone to stand beside her and not let go. It was never aired. The network producer thought it was too soft, too quiet, too simple. "People want fire," he had said, "not whispers." So the interview was shelved, forgotten until now. The junior producer, Axie, didn't ask for permission. He uploaded the video to the station's social account with 1 sentence. "Maybe we should have aired this first." No flashy intro, no edits, just Tiana looking into the camera. The world. Spawns within an hour, over 4 million views. By evening, 20 million people left comments like, "This is what real strength sounds like. You don't need to yell. To change the world, I wish someone held my hand like that." Hashtags returned. Hashtag hold her hand. Hashtag UNAIRED. But unbroken hashtag whispers can win. TIANA single quotes his reaction. Her assistant burst into the room. Breathless Tiana. That old interview they released. It. Tiana blinked. What interview? She clicked the video, watched herself speak, listened to words she had nearly forgotten. She sat back in silence, then whispered, "I wasn't ready then, but maybe the world is now." An unexpected letter the next morning. A handwritten note arrived. By courier it read, "I was the producer who cut your segment. I thought your silence wasn't enough. I was wrong. I've seen angry speeches, I've seen shouting, but you're quiet.
What?
It stayed with me longer than anything loud. Thank you for making me listen differently." No name. Just a heart at the bottom. In a middle school classroom, a teacher played the interview for her students. After it ended, she asked, "What did you learn?" Kavi raised his hand. "She didn't say much," he said. The teacher nodded. "Did that make you feel?" The boy shrugged, thinking, then smiled. "Like maybe I don't have to yell to be strong." Later that night, one more surprise as Tiana walked into her apartment. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was from a publishing house. A voice message played. "Ms. Brooks, we saw the interview. We don't want a book deal just because of headlines. We want your real story. Tell it your way. No noise, no edits. Just truth when you're ready." You're listening. Tiana walks to the window. The city outside had quieted. No sirens. No shouts. Just the soft hum of night. She looked up at the stars. She didn't speak. She just smiled, because the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. The airport looked the same white floors, same check-in lines, same buzz in the air. But this time, Tiana was different. She wasn't holding a ticket. She wasn't looking for a gate. She wasn't a passenger. Anymore, she walked through security people, whispered as she passed. Some smiled. Some reached for their phones. A few flight crew members paused and nodded respectfully. But Tiana just walked, calmly holding a slim leather folder in her hand. Inside it, something that had taken months to build. A new policy manual, a training program, and a letter from the CEO, giving her a new role, head of equity and culture. Development National Air. She wasn't here to bring noise. She was here to build. Something that would last longer than applause. Gate 1 for a familiar place. As she turned the corner, she stopped. Gate 14, the very place she had been pushed. The place where no one stood up. No one helped. She stood there, still for a moment. Then, she smiled, because someone else was standing there too. A girl. The girl with the bright eyes. She looked about 10. Braided hair, shiny pink backpack. Holding her mom's hand, she kept staring at Tiana like she had seen her in a dream. The girl's mother noticed and smiled shyly. "I'm sorry," she said. "She recognizes you." Tiana knelt down gently. "What's your name?" she asked. "Zari," the girl whispered. "And what do you want to be when you grow up, Zari?" The girl grinned. "I want to fly the plane, not just ride it." Tiana's heart warmed. She reached into her bag and handed Zari a small silver pin. It was in the shape of wings. "Then you'll need these," she said. Across the terminal, Laura watches quietly. Laura, the flight attendant who had once pushed her now, wore a new badge. She had completed her full training. She had publicly apologized. She had stepped away from her old beliefs, and now she was watching from a distance as Tiana lifted a child's dreams with her presence. Not her pain, Laura whispered to herself. She never pushed back with anger. And still, she moved the world. Back at the airline office, the CEO read Tiana's final report. A quote from the closing page stood out. "We can't rewrite the skies, but we can change how we fly through them. One crew, one story, one voice. At a time, she closed the folder and said aloud, "Let this be our compass." Evening flight. One last look. Tiana boarded the evening flight, not as a passenger. She was sitting in the jump seat, beside the pilot for an internal review. The door closed, the lights dimmed, and as the plane lifted into the sky, she looked. Down at the world below, no crowds, no noise, just clouds, and the feeling of rising not because she shouted, but because she stood. A final letter from her mother, postscript at home. Her assistant found a small card tucked behind a photo frame. Another note. Short, old, but perfect. One day they'll know your name, but what matters is you'll still know who you are. Love, Mama.